If you want talk, games, and fun all rolled into one, well, you've come to the right place. This is The Game Show, where host Bradley Clarke and his special guests talk about the world of television game and competition shows. But Bradley's guests aren't here to just talk. They came to play a game as well. What will today's topic be? What game does Bradley have planned? There's only one way to find out.
It's time to start the show.
You heard the man. Welcome to The Game Show. And here's your host, the Bradster himself, Bradley Clarke.
I never get tired of hearing Austin Angelo introduce me. Thank you so much, my friends, and welcome everybody to another exciting episode of The Game Show, the talk show all about the world of television game and competition shows. I'm Bradley Clarke, the Bradster, and I am pleased to say that this episode features another first for The Game Show, as I welcome on a game show and reality competition show stage manager. I've never had a stage manager join me as a guest on The Game Show before, and as someone who thirsts for as much game show industry knowledge as I possibly can attain, I am very excited to learn more about this very important position, as well as some inside information on the various shows my guest has worked on. Speaking of shows my guest has worked on, I think it's only fair to share with you what television titles are featured on their impressive resume.
Welcome to the Misery Index, where you can make a fortune from other people's misfortune.
So that's murder then? Where's that rate on the index?
It is between... You said above.
They made me do it!
You are correct. Let's get miserable.
Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young bachelorette searching for the man of her dreams.
She's got her head on straight. She knows what she wants.
She's exactly the type of girl that I'm attracted to.
And 25 men trying to prove they're the one.
I wanted to get to know Trista more than anything I've wanted to do in a long time.
I believe in fate, and that's, I think, why I'm here. I think it's out of both of our controls.
Tonight, the tables have been turned. The roles are reversed. For the first time in television history, a woman will be calling the shots. Trista Wren, America's first bachelorette, will be introduced to 25 handsome bachelors in the hopes that one of them will become her husband.
Oh my God, I can't believe I'm here.
Tonight begins the exciting new season of The Bachelorette. And with 25 single guys vying for the heart of one amazing woman, there's bound to be trouble.
You're going to have to make some sort of an aggressive approach to at least get a little bit of face time.
Can I steal you for a moment?
There's not one person out here who would not kill for the opportunity to get to know Tristan.
25 men begin, and each week egos will be shattered as Trista searches for the one man who can ultimately become her husband. Will she find true love? Will she propose? And if she does, will the man of her dreams say yes? Find out on The Bachelorette.
Today on our show, another player will attempt that pressure-packed climb to a seven-figure payday. Will they make it to the $1 million mountaintop? We're about to find out on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Everybody, welcome to the show. You guys ready to play Millionaire?
That's right, my special guest is the stage manager on the Bachelor franchise, which includes The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, and Bachelor in Paradise. He's also stage managed the syndicated version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, as well as the TBS game show The Misery Index, where I had the pleasure of meeting and working with him. Please welcome game show and reality competition show stage manager extraordinaire, Raf Orozco. Raf, thank you so much for joining me on the game show today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so thrilled that you're my special guest today because while we worked together on the Misery Index, you told me that if I invited you to be my guest on the show, my listeners would be bored by what you would have to contribute. But listeners, I can assure you that Raf has such a great personality and a lot of shows to talk about, so there is no way you can get bored while listening to him. And Raf, as you can probably tell, I love talking about game shows, so whatever you have to share is definitely not going to be boring to me.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Sometimes you need to see it through different lenses to truly appreciate it.
Well, by the end of our conversation, I hope you truly appreciate how much you've done in this industry so far. So we are going to talk all about your career as a stage manager, and then later on, for the game of the day, I have prepared a Bradley Clarke original version of a game show that you stage managed, and you're going to play that game right here on the game show.
Okay. Wow. Thanks, man. I look forward to it.
Well, if you're ready to talk game shows with me, I'm ready to talk with you. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this. I'm ready.
Then let's get started. Before we get into any specific shows, I always like to ask my guests, have you been a game show fan since you were a kid? And how did your love for game shows first begin?
I had sort of taken for granted the influence that game shows had actually had in my life. I've been really thinking about it a lot, especially during these times, because I have a lot of time to think. But since I was a kid, I was like an original latchkey kid. My parents had to work hard. They were immigrants. They were rarely home. So I was a latchkey kid, not complaining, very grateful. But when I was growing up in the 70s, which I feel is sort of like the heyday of game shows, I watched almost nothing but game shows, including in the evening when they had Match Game PM and even Name That Tune and stuff like that. So game shows have always been there, and I just didn't even realize how there it was.
Well, I love it when anyone mentions Match Game PM. I always feel like that version of the show is always forgotten.
Get ready to match the stars. Jimmy Walker, Brett Summers, Charles Nelson Riley, from Palmerstown, USA, Janelle Allen, from Password Plus, Alan Levin, and Betty White, as we play the star-studded Big Money Match Game PM. And now, here's the star of Match Game PM, Gene Rader.
Oh my God, man. I've been racking my head. And I grew up in LA, so I think there was a couple things that were maybe regional. Chick Hearn, who was the voice of the Lakers forever and ever, hosted Bowling for Dollars. Now, I don't know if it's technically a game show, but that kind of stuff I watched.
It's funny because in today's revival phase of game shows, I'm so surprised that no one has ever tried to redo a bowling game show.
Well, it's just a matter of time because what's old is new. Basically, people really don't have a lot of clever ideas for game shows, except for what you and I met on called the Misery Index, which I thought was a nice blending of old game show and new technology, YouTube and all that stuff.
So did you always dream of working in television and specifically the game show industry?
I can't say dreamed. I grew up in the business. My parents were caterers, so I grew up on sets. Anytime I wasn't in school, I'd be working summers and holidays. I worked on sets, but in the catering truck. So I literally never thought of a moment where I wasn't going to be working in the industry in one way or another. I just happened just by meeting different people and ending up being a stage manager. I was doing feature films. Speaking of bowling, I met someone on a bowling team, and that person introduced me to an accountant for film. And that accountant, she got me a PA job, and it just went from there. And then I met another person, I got a different job, and this and that. After about 15 years in film, someone who I'd crossed paths with asked me to stage manage for a couple of days. And I said, well, I have no idea how to do that because I come from film. And they're like, you'll be fine. So my course to stage managing and stage managing game shows was just basically luck and meeting people. I had no idea that stage managing existed. I came from a film background. I met some people. They were hiring for the Oxygen Network, which was a network that Oprah started. That actually had a couple of game shows on it. And that's how I ended up stage managing and then starting to stage manage game shows.
So for the listeners who don't exactly know what you do, in a general sense, what does a stage manager do?
I always use the sports analogy. I would be the quarterback on the field/floor, and the director is the head coach from the booth. That's the way I've always looked at it. The director tells me what plays to run, tells the rest of us, and we all run it. The other analogy I use is I'm a traffic cop. It's always hard for me to talk about myself stage managing. It's just like the point of the spear, basically.
Well, when you're good at your job, it's hard to give yourself credit, but you do a wonderful job, at least from the show that I worked on with you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I really appreciate that.
So let's go on and talk about some of the specific shows that you've worked on, beginning with one of the biggest reality TV franchises of all time, the Bachelor franchise. Now, you've worked on Bachelor, Bachelorette, Bachelor Pad, Bachelor in Paradise. But do you only stage manage the studio segments, or do you actually go out and do other work when they're on location?
It all depends on the season. And let us not forget the short-lived Listen to Your Heart Bachelor spinoff, which was the music romance Bachelor spinoff that aired in the beginning of 2020.
20 single men and women.
Oh my God.
One shared dream.
Music is a great gateway to love. Welcome to Listen to Your Heart. Let the journey begin.
Listen to your heart.
Could love
I might be falling for you.
and music
It was sexy, it was passionate.
make for the perfect duet?
Love is like the ultimate prize.
Or will they leave as solo acts? The Bachelor presents Listen to Your Heart, Monday, April 13th on ABC.
Basically, what I was originally brought on to do was to do the studio shows. The Bachelor had already been on for a few seasons, and they were incorporating their studio stuff much more. That's when they were starting to incorporate even more after the final rose and the tell-alls, the women tell-all, the men tell-all. I knew someone who was working on it. They introduced me to Kenny Fuchs, who's the director, I believe has been on your show. And also, I was crossing paths with Chris Harrison at the TV Guide Network, where he was doing a show called Hollywood 411, and I was stage managing. And Kenny and Chris said, hey, you can come out and do this? And I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. A little nervous. And I want to say that was 13 years ago, 14 years ago.
I always find it interesting how the reality competition shows from when the reality boom first started, like Survivor, The Amazing Race, American Idol, and certainly The Bachelor, these are the shows that are still successful to this day, even though so many other formats have tried to become the new big reality competition show but failed. I personally call it modern nostalgia because all these shows have had such a loyal fan base for so long, me being one of the loyal fans, which is why they are still on the air today.
Absolutely agree with you. As you were talking about it, I can think of about 3 or 4 shows that I worked on that were /reality that were trying to jump on that just didn't take. And for some reason, the originals really grabbed a hold of America's enjoyment and is really stuck. Also, I can only speak to the Bachelor franchise, is that they really put the work into it. They take what they have, they mold it into something that's really entertaining, and people really still love it. The numbers are great. You know, when I was working on it, social media wasn't that big of a deal. But now with social media and all these different cast members have their own following before and after, it's pretty amazing how popular the show is. I can't tell you, people that hit me up on Instagram, whenever Chris will post a picture of me and him working and he'll tag me, a couple hundred at least will hit me up just to be closer to the franchise. And once again, I can only speak to Bachelor and Bachelorette. They've really had to adapt over the course of the years how to keep the secrets, keep the suspense, because it is a weekly show. It's nothing that they put out all at once that you could binge. And that's part of the challenge, especially with social media. But I feel they've done a great job at it. And I feel really honored and blessed to be part of that franchise.
As you mentioned with Listen to Your Heart, The Bachelor has had its fair share of spin-offs, one of them being Bachelor Pad, which ran for 3 seasons on ABC during the summer seasons of 2010 to 2012, before being replaced by Bachelor in Paradise. Bachelor Pad was basically the Bachelor version of Big Brother in that it was former Bachelor and Bachelorette contestants living in a house together, competing in competitions, and voting each other out in the process.
Well, here's a new show that has everything a Bachelor fan wants and more. Because the craziest, sexiest, wildest cast members of all time are coming together to live in the Bachelor Mansion. And we're calling it Bachelor Pad. Once upon a time, there were bachelors and bachelorettes who found love on television.
I would be honored if you would be my wife.
You may now kiss your bride.
I found the woman of my dreams, and it's been so worth it.
And then there was everybody else.
I don't know what you think of this.
I was really starting to see a future together. This sucks.
Now, the most memorable bachelors and bachelorettes of all time are back for a second chance at love.
All the girls look smoking hot, every single one of them.
Everyone is beautiful everywhere you look.
They're all living in one house and sleeping in one room. Welcome to Bachelor Pad.
She possesses all the qualities in a woman that I would want to marry one day. But I know she's got a boyfriend.
Everyone's got it wrong about you.
I love you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, I didn't know that, I'd get so close to such an amazing guy.
I guess with every hero, you've got to have a villain. you know?
There's gonna be drama and people are gonna fight. That's the name of the game.
Don't call me a jackass.
Or what?
Or what?
Or what?
We are not friends. I don't know why you think I'd want to associate with you.
I can't live with her every day for the next 3 weeks. I would rather be poor than be a bitch.
It's not worth it. I'm sorry. It's not worth it.
Everyone's gonna see when this airs who's real, who's not, who's fake, and who's a complete imbecile.
I'm so screwed.
I haven't seen myself cry in a while. Welcome to the Bachelor Pad.
That's just a taste. I can tell you it is spectacular.
I've always been surprised with the fact that a show like this didn't last longer, especially since on the regular series, although the premise is to find love, a lot of the season storylines have to do with finding ways to knock out other hated contestants from the competition. So Raf, as someone who worked on Bachelor Pad, are you also surprised that this spin-off concept didn't last as long?
Yes, I am, because I was there the whole time for those 3 seasons. If I recall, there was a cash prize, which made it a little different, obviously, than the other shows in the Bachelor franchise. And I think at the end, they had to vote to keep or to share. I'm pretty sure I remember that the end of season 1, there was some big drama, or maybe season 2. But to tell you the truth, I was a little surprised that the Bachelor Pad didn't take off. But I feel that the Bachelor Pad opened the door for Bachelor in Paradise. And I've had the pleasure of doing Bachelor in Paradise. It's beautiful, it's dramatic, and it's fun to be a part of. And I think the viewership indicates that it's fun to watch too. But Bachelor Pad, I thought, was a great idea. And, who knows?
Speaking of Paradise, so are you in Mexico when they film, or are you still just doing the reunions at the end?
I was in Mexico for the last season pre-COVID, so 2019. The show is starting to bring me around a little bit more on the locations to help out their main stage manager, who's a dear friend of mine. I consider him a brother. His name is Paul Danner. He's been with the show since day one. As the show progressed in, I would say, more traditional blocking and camera, in more of a traditional studio show format, they brought me in to help Pauly. So what I would do is bring more of the studio stuff to the reality world. So I'm actually crossing the 2 worlds, because they rarely cross. And on that note, Pauly will come with me when we do the studio stuff, and we just have a great team.
When you're in a studio, it seems like stage managing is easier because everything is in one location. But with Paradise, you could have cast members in the water, or on the beach beds, or at the bar, or in the bunks. So are the multiple locations across the stretch of beach tough for you to handle as a stage manager?
For my job doing the reality, even at the beginning of the studio stuff for Bachelor and Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise, there was a really rough learning period for me, because I didn't come from the reality world. In the reality world, especially the folks at Bachelor, they invented a way to do things that hadn't been done before. And I jump in, admittedly, more of a old school, even though I don't consider myself one of those screamer guys and those stage managers who have to be in charge of everything. But crossing over into that reality world was a big learning curve for me. There's things that'll happen on a reality set that if that happened on a stage, as a stage manager, you lose your mind. It's not necessarily productive for stage work, but it absolutely works for field work. And I feel over the course of the last 8 years that I've done more of their field stuff, I've really come to understand what they need from me. I don't know everything, and I just bring whatever little bit I can to help tighten it up. But you don't want to tighten it up too much, because then you're taking away a little bit of the spontaneity of the show. You don't want to tell people, no, you have to stand here. If somebody's having a fight verbally, you're not going to say, hey, can you step to your left a little so I can get better light? It was more of a learning curve for me than I think it was for them.
Well, especially in today's day and age where everyone thinks that everything is scripted.
Yeah, that's the thing. Listen, there are some things that I feel that the more traditional approach has helped with them in the field, especially rose ceremonies. Because a rose ceremony, if people are familiar with the show, everyone is in a certain spot. And there's ways that the 2 worlds can blend. And I feel that the Bachelor franchise has really done it well. And I've actually learned so much from the field stuff that I incorporate into other stage shows that I do. It actually has made me a better stage manager. If anyone's listening to this who's worked with me, they'll probably disagree, but it's made me less uptight. It's made me roll with the flow a little bit more.
Have you stage managed any of the rose ceremonies, or is that all Paul's job?
I have actually. As we're talking, Bachelorette is wrapping up as far as on air, and they're already starting to show Bachelor promos, which starts January 2021.
Premiering on January 4th.
an incredible new season of The Bachelor with our new Bachelor, Matt James.
Love for me is about the heart. And the way that I view life, everything is a blessing.
He's tall, dark, and handsome. What more could you want? 10 out of 10. He is the perfect bachelor.
He's probably the most handsome man I've ever seen.
You may be someone that I could share my life with.
I felt that instant chemistry. It's the best feeling. It's like butterflies and excitement.
It just keeps getting hotter. Whew. It's just like, yum, daddy.
I felt like we had like a real connection, a real spark.
I definitely could see myself falling in love with you.
Oh my gosh, I am so in love with Matt. All of my worst insecurities are coming out.
I feel like I'm like losing my mind. I want to see Matt.
This isn't easy for anybody.
It looks like you have a guilty conscience. You have no class.
I'm not here for the girls. I'm here for Matt. I just have to hope that it's worth it.
An all-new season of The Bachelor premieres January 4th.
Those two were done in bubbles because of COVID. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to help out on those shows. So I stayed for 5 weeks on each one. I got to do rose ceremonies. I'd done a couple quote unquote rose ceremonies in Bachelor Pad, but it's a much different beast when you're doing it with 30 women or 30 men vying for the attention of this one person. It's a whole different beast. So yes, I got to do it for the last 2 seasons with Paul.
How long do the rose ceremonies usually take to film?
It all depends. Obviously, the first few weeks that the show is on air, there's more people. So that takes longer. It also all depends on the bachelor or bachelorette who, if they're having trouble picking, there's some people that he really wants or she really wants to keep around, but there's not enough room. You know, there's a lot of decision making happening during the actual ceremony. I grew up in the business, been in it my entire life, but there are times where I still actually will get into it. You know, I'll just be sitting off ready to send Chris Harrison and I'll go, oh, who are they picking? Who are they going to pick on this one? So for a veteran who's dead inside like me, it's actually sort of fun when those moments happen. So there's no way to put it on, but I'll tell you right now, it definitely lasts longer than what you see. It's an all-nighter. There are times where you will see the sun come up.
The tell-all shows and the After the Final Rose shows definitely have some heated moments, and the studio atmosphere definitely shifts after an argument between the cast members or the talking of a breakup between the lead person and a finalist. So Raf, as a stage manager, are those moments tough for you to handle because the cast members themselves can get agitated and upset, so it might be hard to control them?
Yeah, I guess tougher than your average moment, I guess, as a stage manager. There are times where people are getting really riled up. And so my job as a stage manager is I never want to become part of the story. So I don't want to jump in situations that are unwarranted. But I also don't want something to get out of hand because that is my job. That's my responsibility. So sometimes, depending on the season, it is a little challenging. So shows like After the Final Rose or the Tell-Alls, or I've done many Housewives reunion shows, all those add a little extra challenge as a stage manager because you're dealing with what I call civilians as opposed to actors. And they're having real emotions. And a lot of times the energy becomes a little tense. And my primary job, I feel, as a stage manager is safety. And that includes contestants, our cast. So it's a little tricky for me to decide sometimes, do I need to jump in? But I also don't want to ruin the reality of the show, and I don't want to escalate things. So it is challenging. That happens rarely, but when it does, you definitely have to be prepared for it.
The After the Final Rose finales are live shows, and while the home viewers are watching the finale footage, including the lead hopefully getting engaged, the studio audience is watching it as well. So for people who have never been to a taping, what is the mood like in the studio for these finales?
What's interesting is for the studio audience that is watching, so the tape pieces that the world is watching live, they are also watching live. When we come out live to the studio audience, their reactions are just like the people at home. And I think that's why those shows work. But the energy in the room, depending on the clip, if someone is down to the last 2 people and they just broke someone's heart, you're not coming back out to us live with big applause going because there's sincere emotions that this audience feels that every time that we do these shows, I'm constantly blown away because I think the fact that I've been in the business so long and I might be a little jaded, the emotional involvement that the studio audience has, especially on the Bachelor franchise shows. So the energy in the room is quite frankly amazing. It's almost like when I did Millionaire, when you're getting up into the $250,000 and the $500,000 questions, where like everyone really starts being invested. On those Bachelor live shows, they're vested every minute of that show.
Going into a segment, are you told whether the outro will be an appropriate time for the audience to clap so you can relay that information to them? Because sometimes it seems like the audience is a bit confused as to whether they should clap or not going into a commercial break, especially when something really dramatic just occurred.
The one note I try to give, because as a studio audience, depending on the type of show, it's sort of beaten into you mentally like, hey, when we come back from break, you applaud. When we go out to break, you applaud. And I found at the beginning of when I started doing these things, sometimes people would clap just because they thought they needed to for the show, and it wasn't appropriate for the moment. So what I do, and I'll always work with warm-up guys, I'll introduce myself to the audience and I will tell the audience, hey, you're going to see a range of emotions. And when we go to commercial breaks, you react the way you feel that you would react. If you think it's a great moment, then you applaud going to break. If you think it's a little sad, then you sit there and you think about it. And that tends to work. The term that producers and directors will give to me or other stage managers is let it happen organically, which is a term I hate with such a passion. However, it's an accurate term often with live studio audiences. Let it happen organically.
And then, of course, you always get that one person who starts clapping and then realizes this might not be the time to clap.
Yeah, you sit there and a piece of me just dies a little like, oh man, it's interesting.
During the season finale, there are many instances where, as the footage is being shown, a box will come on the screen with a shocked audience member's face. And you can hear verbal reactions in the background, especially in an instance where an engagement is being called off, as we saw during 2 recent Bachelor seasons and a recent Bachelorette season. When big moments like these happen and the audience members really start reacting and making noise based on what's going on, how do you prepare yourself to settle the audience down either when you're going into a commercial or getting ready to come out of a commercial?
Well, that's very perceptive of you. So what happens in those moments, and now at this point, I'm used to it. If something dramatic, as we use that word ad nauseum, if something dramatic happens going into a commercial, we lay back. I lay back. Polly and I will tell everyone who can hear us on our communication system, and the director will also tell everyone on headset, lay back. Because usually if it's just a normal segment, I'll go in during the break. Hair and makeup might do a quick touch up on our guests. I'll come in and I'll make sure that Chris is good and everything. But when it's a serious moment like that, we all lay back and just give it to the Bachelor and that person or the Bachelorette, whatever the case may be. We lay back. We know ahead of time because we know what we're going to show as far as clips. So what we'll do is during the course of our rehearsal and our rundown meetings, we'll say, hey, this might be a moment where we need to lay back. And if we lay back and nothing big is happening during a commercial break, then I'll sneak in. I'll make sure everyone's okay if they need water or anything like that. And then we go. The live shows are a lot easier to do that because commercial breaks are only like 3 to 5 minutes long. The tape shows are a little bit trickier, but we do communicate. We come up with a game plan, and then I will sit with the warm-up guy and make sure that they're not playing some kind of pump-up music after someone's just been dumped. There is a little pre-plan to it, but you also have to be ready to adjust at any time.
Yeah, after someone just got dumped, that's probably not the best time to play bye, bye, bye.
Well, I got to tell you, probably back in the early days of this show when we were figuring out, and I've been on other shows where all of a sudden there'll be a harsh segment and then all of a sudden the warm-up person wasn't quite listening because they're also got a very hard job. Their whole job is energy, and they might not have heard that someone's crying and they start playing a certain song. So there have been moments over my career where there's been some ironically titled songs played.
Going into each season, do you predict who you think will be the chosen man or woman at the end, or in the case of Paradise, which couples you think might work?
I don't get into that. The few arrivals that I have done, first impression. One of the roses is called the first impression rose. But as a crew member, especially on the Bachelor franchise, I try to take any of that out because I don't even want to subconsciously favor someone over another person. I want to give everyone the exact same positive experience as far as what I bring to the table as a stage manager. I want to give my service to everyone equally. I can't let my personal feelings, especially if it's a game show, especially when people are playing for money. If people are playing for money, even if I don't necessarily like you because you said something to me that I just didn't like or was off color, maybe I'm misjudging you, but I can't let my personal feelings, especially in the negative, affect the way I do my job. Everyone's got to feel exactly the same. And that's one of the things I pride myself on, especially on game shows like Millionaire.
And then when you get the chance to watch it back, then you can yell at the TV.
Oh, that's implying that I actually watch anything I work on. But sure, the crew will have fun. But I've never seen it where people are like, I'm cheering for this person. You'll hear people say, oh, wow, I can't believe he sent her home or she sent him home. There'll be stuff like that, but I don't get into that. But for me personally, when I do a game show, because I spend a lot of time with the contestants showing them where to stand and doing this. And if there's someone I get a really good vibe from or just having a good conversation with, I will cheer for them. But I will do it in a way that in no way is showing any kind of favoritism or helping them win. I think about that stuff so much, especially during a game show. One of my goals, especially on a game show, is to give that contestant a memory for life, like be part of the positive memory, whether they win or lose. Because listen, someone's going to lose and that's going to suck, but I don't want them to have a bad experience because of the crew. So I put in a lot of thought into how I talk to people and the verbiage I use and how to read people. And some people want jovial and music played and others don't. I sort of take pride in that. The routine at Millionaire was we would bring in a bunch of contestants that we were hoping to get to because, as you know, you're familiar with Millionaire, there's no clock on that. You can have one contestant for a 30-minute show or you could have three. So we bring in a whole bunch to make sure we're covered. And all the potential contestants for that day, you would bring them onto the floor in the morning. So I clear the floor of the crew. Producers will bring them all. It could be anywhere from 8 to 15 to 20 people. And you walk them onto the stage. And now, especially with Millionaire, because Millionaire is so iconic, every morning when those people would walk onto the floor, and this wasn't with all the hoopla, we'd give them as much as possible to get used to it. The look on their faces of just being there reminded me how cool this is, not only for them, but for me to be a part of. And that whatever I'm going to be doing that day with them will be most likely a very small part, but could be even bigger. So I really try to do my part to make the best of it for them. And once again, I keep referencing Millionaire because that is the most iconic of the game shows, the things I've done. Because, you know, the reality is a completely different beast. But I'm the last person that a contestant, or the stage manager in this case, myself, is the last person they talk to before they start their portion of the show. The next person they're about to talk to is Chris Harrison. You see all sorts of different things. You see nervous energy or energy that they're just so happy to be there that it almost doesn't really matter what happens, even though it does. It's really cool when people have a blast, that just enjoy the experience. Not so much when they lose on the first question. That's a different vibe. And so when that would happen, you'd show them respect. Myself or Frank Nicotero, who was the warm-up guy during the time I was there, we would give them one last shout out and the audience would give them a nice round of applause and they would walk away and we'd hold off before we'd play any music. However, you know, you want to give due respect to what just happened to that person, but you also have someone ready to walk on to enjoy their time. You know what I mean? So it's like this fine line. You wait till someone walks off the floor, but you got to turn around and go, okay, now let's get it pumped back up, the energy for this person.
And since we've already begun discussing Millionaire, let's continue to talk about your time stage managing the show, which was from 2016 to 2019, Chris Harrison's second, third, and fourth seasons. And as you mentioned, Millionaire is such an iconic show. So getting the opportunity to stage manage this show in particular, especially since you're a game show fan, I'm sure that must have been very exciting, correct?
You know what? I got to tell you, I was more nervous than excited. I was brought in under not the most ideal of situations. There was a change in position. So I came into a situation that could have just been very tense. But I got to tell you, it wasn't. The director, who I never worked with before, Rich. He couldn't have made me feel more welcome. After about a day or two of just trying to get my bearings, then it sunk in that, oh, I'm doing one of the most iconic game shows on television. And then it occurred to me that I had also worked with Regis on a talk show for a season. And there were nice moments where Chris and I would be sitting on the stage waiting for the next contestant or whatnot. And we'd look at each other. And we always use that line from the Tom Hanks movie, That Thing You Do. I'll look at him, I'll go, how did we get here? And then Chris will say, I am Spartacus, or something to that effect. We'll always have our little gags. We'll take in the moments of, wow, check this out. This is pretty cool.
What talk show did you do with Regis?
He had a sports talk show for one season, the first year of Fox Sports 1, which was called Crowd Goes Wild. Regis was the head, and there was at least 5 or 6 other hosts, all on one big table. Regis was the lead, and it was so great to work with him. Rest in peace. So that's when I got to work with Regis.
You've worked with Chris Harrison a lot, from the Bachelor franchise to syndicated Millionaire to another Chris Harrison game show he hosted for ABC back in 2011 called You Deserve It. Since you're on the studio floor during all the tapings, is it nice working with a host that you've collaborated with on so many occasions? Because you know Chris's style and how he works in front of a studio audience, so I'm presuming it makes your job a lot easier.
Absolutely. And I mean, at least for me as a stage manager, I feel like I know what he needs before he has to tell me. There have been times on shows where he'll just give me a look and I'll know what he's thinking about and I need to go take care of something. And those are moments where we just look at each other and we just laugh. We just smile, because it's just like if a quarterback looks at a receiver telling him what to do without ever saying anything. It's pretty cool. I've been blessed to be able to work with Chris, who admittedly I'm biased, but is one of the best hosts ever, because there are 2 types of hosts. There's the host that is listening, and there's the host that's waiting to talk. Chris is the host that's listening. So it's great. Chris and I are like, when we're in the zone, it's like dance partners. I know where he needs me to be, and he knows that I'm going to be there. Hosting is a job, and there's a skill set to it. Sure, there's personality involved, but that's not just it. And I've been able to work with people who aren't necessarily hosts primarily. They could either be actors or comedians or whatnot, but hosting isn't their main job. And there's a difference. It's a whole different thing. I'm not taking away from anyone, because obviously there are very many successful game shows and quote unquote hosts who come from different lines of the entertainment field. But a host, that's a skill set. And there are maybe a handful of people like that. I'm probably losing anyone who's under the age of 30 by saying this, but if you stop and you look at the hosts from back in the 70s, and people are going, what are the 70s? Look it up. Monty Hall, Jack Barry, Alan Ludden, Burt Convey, even Richard Dawson. Like, Richard Dawson was an actor. However, when he was a game show host, that was his primary job. He wasn't really acting then. Sure, he did The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but when it is your primary gig, there's a lot of musicians who are also actors, and a lot of them are pretty good, but they're not as good as they are at music, because that's their primary passion. For those of you who don't know, look up old password games and watch Alan do his thing. Watch that. That's hosting. That's game show hosting.
I totally agree. And speaking of great game show hosting, I've had the pleasure of having Chris Harrison join me on the game show. And I asked him whether he thought the hot seat was ever going to return on the syndicated version, because the original Money Ladder format was brought back when Chris joined as host. Unfortunately, the hot seat never ended up returning to syndication, but I was wondering if you personally were hoping for a hot seat return.
Listen, as a stage manager, yeah, I would have loved to said the hot seat was there. But I got to tell you, after the first initial run of Millionaire, when Regis was doing it on ABC, and then all of a sudden it was on every night in prime time, which as much as I love Millionaire and the classic and the hot seat, I would have loved to, as a stage manager, to have done that. But I enjoyed the format of my time, which I guess was up to the last year of syndication. I really enjoyed that, because I'm also a trivia guy. So to sit there as a stage manager and play the game, I was really into it. It was cool. The hot seat's cool. Aren't they doing that now with Kimmel?
Yeah, they brought the whole original vibe back.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not sure what Chris said, but I'm sure there were certain contestants that I'm sure Chris wouldn't have minded having a chair to sit down in.
That's funny, because I was going to ask you that. What was the longest someone ever took to answer a question?
Oh my gosh. Listen, I couldn't put a clock to it. However, if they were taking just way too much time, the floor producer would walk out. We would get a heads up. They would say, Raf, producer walking out, because all of a sudden out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody trying to walk on the floor, especially Millionaire because it was in the round. I would stop them. But a producer would go out there and go, you really need to answer. And then if they took even more time, they would whisper in Chris's ear. The host needs to be sort of a referee, but you also don't want them to be the bad guy. But there are times, I'll tell you, where it felt like it was forever. I've never really seen it. I've never actually seen any of the shows I've ever worked on as they air. And that's not because I'm better than that or I just don't care. It's just I've already seen it. I was there. But I can't imagine what it looks like when it's edited if there's someone who's been standing out there for like 7 minutes before they gave an answer. And I never had a conversation with S&P, Standards and Practices, or with legal, but I would assume when we got into the 500,000 and stuff, they would probably be a little forgiving time management wise. There was one time on Millionaire, and it was a higher up question. You can't hold me to this, but I'm going to say it was probably a $250,000 question. And Chris had just asked the question, and boom, all the power went out. This whole area of Vegas where we were shooting, which I think was Paradise Road and Koval or something like that. That whole area, there was a lightning strike at the transformer or a bird or something, and power went out just as the person got the question. And, you know, it was funny because all of a sudden I'm being told in my headset to not let any of the audience talk. We don't want audience yelling answers. Legal producers and the lawyer had to run out there immediately. And it was pretty amazing, those kind of situations.
So what happened? Did they have to throw out that question?
They had him answer the question to the lawyer and Chris and the showrunner. They read the question again off camera. They had him give the answer. Then we held. Then when everything came back, when power came up, we recorded and asked him to repeat the same answer. We didn't want him sitting there thinking about it too much, and we didn't want some audience member to shout something out. So we got the answer as quickly as we could, held, and then proceeded.
Over the course of your career, Raf, you haven't worked on too many trivia-based shows, but of course, when it comes to trivia shows and audiences, there is always the risk that an audience member shouts out an answer by accident. So did any audience members ever shout out an answer to a question during your time on Millionaire?
No, but we would remind the audience, hey, you can't say anything. I'll tell you what I do recall. There were a few times on Millionaire where we could hear people whispering to each other. It didn't seem to affect the contestant. We don't think the contestant heard, but we know that the audio department could hear people talking because they had audience mics above them.
During your time on Millionaire, the contestants stood in front of a screen to answer their questions, while Chris had a monitor in his view to see the information he needed as well as the correct answer. In addition, unlike earlier seasons of the show, the audience can be seen by the players because they are not covered in dark lighting. So with that being said, did you have to remind the players to not look at Chris's monitor to peek at whether they got the answer correct after they said final answer, as well as remind the players that they can't look around at the audience members for any subtle hints?
Yes, absolutely. And I would remind them in the morning. I would also remind them right before they went on. Everything I told all the contestants as a group, I would remind them individually. So during my years with Chris on Millionaire, what we call the cheat monitor, there's a monitor where the host can see everything. Name of the contestant, what question they're on, how many lifelines they've used, et cetera, like where on the money tree were they, that kind of stuff. So it would be easy for him to reference it, but it never had the answer in it. Chris could see everything the contestant could see, if that makes sense. There would be the question, and then there would be the choices. So if a contestant does the 50-50, Chris doesn't have to turn around and look at that board. He can look straight ahead, right over the shoulder of the contestant. So basically in Chris's eye line towards the contestant, and that would have all the information. We never had a problem with the contestant turning around. There was a couple times where we would have to remind a Millionaire contestant not to look at their +1, because during my years on Millionaire, the +1 was directly behind them. There was never any controversy. It was more like somebody would get an answer correct, or they'd be really tense and they'd, sort of turn around. I don't recall there being any kind of a issue with S&P or legal regarding any contestants cheating, but we were all over that. They would be looking for it in the booth. We had a lawyer looking for it. Myself, we would always be looking for that, but really never had an issue. We did have one issue by accident where our warm-up guy, we would play music to pump the audience up. Everybody does it, right? Because it's not on air. so there's no licensing. However, one day we played a song, and the band that we played, I can't remember who it was, but the song that we played was potentially an answer later on. Every morning, the warm-up guy has to get with legal and say, hey, what can I play and what can't I play? During my years, it was this great guy, one of the best ever. His name is Frank Nicotero. And they would come up to Frank and they would say, and I'm just making something up, you can't play Queen, you can't play Whitney Houston, and you can't play Van Halen. Anything else you can play. And here's the thing, those questions may not even come up during the day, but there was a chance they could. And that's how in-depth S&P and legal gets into not giving anyone any kind of advantage.
You worked on Millionaire for 3 seasons, but throughout your whole time, there was not $1 million winner. And in fact, there wasn't even a $1 million question ever asked during the Chris Harrison run of Millionaire. So was it disappointing knowing that you never got to see the confetti fly?
As a fan, yeah, love to see that $1 million and to be part of that and have the confetti fly and the excitement, because I didn't realize how into it I would get. However, my answer as a stage manager is, if it happens, that's great, but it's also a pain in the ass to clean up. What's funny is when we would get to a certain level, I would have to go through a protocol of contacting, I think it was 2 different departments. The button guy had to be next to me, so he would be next to me going off of my cue, and the cannons had to be warmed up. We had to make sure they were ready to go. And the joke was, during the 3rd year, I was like, is that confetti turned to dust? I mean, is it the same confetti? What are we doing? But as a fan, I would have loved to have seen it. And as a stage manager, part of me would love to be part of giving away $1 million. But I'm also a stage manager, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is going to take a while to reset.
So was it the same confetti, or did they have to load up the cannons with new confetti each season?
They loaded it up new each season because they had to break down the stage when we were done. They would break down the stage and put it in storage and thus take the confetti out and reload it the next year.
So you said you're a big fan of trivia. How well do you think you would do on the show?
Well, I did take the test and I passed. Literally, it's just the luck of the draw as far as which questions you're getting. But I love trivia. I've always loved trivia. I didn't even know it was trivia if I'd watched game shows as a kid. I didn't know that's what it was called. But I feel I would have done okay. Like I said, I took the test and I passed, and that's a hard test to take, and I'm very proud of that.
Well, it's funny because Millionaire is one of those shows where it's one thing to know the answers, but it's another thing to risk so much money on whether you do think you know those answers.
Exactly. And obviously, as the show proved for being on, because it's a completely different thing to Jeopardy. Jeopardy, you get to pick the category. Millionaire, you don't. So if you don't know oceans, which was a thing for me, like every time there was an ocean question, I was like, who the hell knows this? But then if there was a sports or music question, I would know that. But you could stay away from those kind of questions on Jeopardy, but you can't on Millionaire.
So Syndicated Millionaire ended in 2019 after 17 seasons. When you heard that the show was canceled, what was your reaction?
I was really bummed. I was bummed as a TV, not historian, but a person who follows television my whole life. You think of long-running shows, not only in the game show genre, but stuff like Bonanza, now The Simpsons, and stuff like that. I was really bummed. Also, employment as a stage manager, I was bummed because that was always a nice 2-month run in Las Vegas. However, in this business, I'm not really surprised by anything. And I actually don't doubt that it'll be brought back in syndication at one point.
Well, I always found it interesting that they canceled in syndication and right away they brought it back in prime time, which I think it was a little too soon. Is that the same feeling for you as well?
I guess I didn't really think about it in that sense. I stopped trying to guess what executives and networks and these people who make these decisions, I stopped trying to guess what they base them on because I'm usually wrong. So I figure they do what they do. As a fan of game shows, hopefully they succeed. And as a fan of employment, hopefully I'll get to be part of it. I'm so bad at guessing these things. I'll work on a game show pilot that I think is great, and it'll go nowhere. But then I'll see a game show or a competition show and go, oh my God, what is this? How is this going to make it? And it's a huge hit. The Masked Singer being an example.
Yeah, I was also very skeptical about The Masked Singer when I first heard about it, but it has proven to be a competition show force for Fox. And speaking about Fox, next I want to talk about the Fox reboot of Love Connection that you worked on. The show ran for 2 seasons, but Raf, did you work on both seasons or just season 1?
I worked on the first season. I couldn't do the second season because there was a conflict with Bachelor.
So I saw in the credits that you were one of 6 stage managers on that show. Is there a specific reason why there were 6 stage managers for Love Connection?
Well, one, it was a huge stage. On that particular one, because there was entrances from both sides. So you needed 3 on the floor. You needed 2 others to be walking contestants, making sure that people don't cross paths, making sure that the 3 that went on the date don't cross paths with the person who went on the date with all 3. There's a lot of moving parts to that particular show and to most of the bigger game shows as far as big stages. So yeah, that's why you needed 6. As stage managers, you want as many as you can get because the game show world adds so many different variables as far as these folks can't cross paths. This person can't be on the stage until this person's already talked, that kind of stuff. And then you got to get the next 3 people. Actually, on Love Connection would be 4 because it would be the person and the 3 dates. You have to get them ready while you're shooting the other show. So you need people constantly moving.
So what was your specific job on Love Connection?
I was with Andy Cohen, getting him ready. And then I would send the lead out from their bridge. And then you do typical stage manager stuff. You're around, you're putting out fires, you're making sure all the other stage managers have everything they need, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I did.
Being that you've worked on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise, as well as Love Connection and the 2018 summertime show The Proposal, which was basically an entire season of The Bachelor condensed into an hour-long episode, is there a particular reason why you like to work on shows revolving around finding love, or are these the types of shows that just happen to be the jobs that come up for you?
Well, it's because I'm a romantic at heart. I love love. No, here's really what it is. I get a call. If it works out schedule-wise, I do it. For example, like when I started doing The Bachelor, they liked me, so that naturally progressed into doing Bachelorette, Bachelor in Paradise, any of those specials with Bachelor Pad or the Olympics one they did, because it's the same company. So that sort of builds you in. Now, The Proposal was just a friend of mine was lead stage manager, and he called me up asking if I'd help out. So that was just a coincidence. A Love Connection, same thing. Until you just mentioned it, I didn't even think about it. But I guess I am the stage manager of love.
And you've stage managed actual weddings as well. So, Raf, no one can deny your stage manager of love title.
I have stage managed 4 real weddings, so I'm very comfortable with love.
Moving away from love-based shows, in 2013, you stage managed Voz Kids, which is the Spanish-language American version of The Voice for Kids that aired on Telemundo. I'm curious, Raf, where did they film Voz Kids, and were the coaches' chairs used on the show the same chairs used on the regular NBC series of The Voice?
So Voz Kids, I did the first year, and that was shot in Miami. And it was shot on the old Flipper soundstage, but it was not the same chairs. It was built by the same people, but it wasn't the same chairs.
The Voice Kids has been a successful spin-off of the show all over the world, so are you surprised an American version of The Voice Kids has not been produced yet? Because I certainly am.
I guess to make an amendment to my never being surprised, I guess I'm actually, now that you mention it out loud, I'm surprised that it hasn't been done. I never thought about it. If it happens, that wouldn't surprise me. I don't know why it wouldn't be successful. I mean, The Voice has been on forever and it seems to be still doing very well.
Especially now, since it seems like every reality show has a kids version now.
Well, we had kids, not all 3 seasons I did Millionaire. We had kids the first 2 seasons I did Millionaire. We didn't have kids the 3rd season. But let's hope they don't do a kids Bachelor, because that could probably open up a whole can of worms. But I guess what surprises me more is stuff that hasn't been done as opposed to stuff that is being pitched to be done.
Well, believe it or not, one idea that actually has been done was a game show centered around cats. It aired on GSN back in 2008, and you stage managed it. The show is called Think Like a Cat Game Show. Raf, do you remember that experience?
Oh my God. Wow, you just brought back a lot of memories. But yes, I stage managed what I believe is the only game show that was literally wrangling cats, which is a old stage manager joke. How was that show? Oh, it was like wrangling cats. Literally wrangling cats.
A common show business line is never work with children or animals. So did this statement ring true while working on Think Like a Cat Game Show?
Yes, especially because these weren't trained animals. Usually if you work with an animal, depending on the show, but 9 times out of 10, if you're using animals, they're most likely trained. So, you're working with people who've done it. That show was all just house cats of contestants. And that was a crazy show. Because I'll tell you what, we shot for like 16 hours. But whatever the length of the show was, it was basically a sponsored commercial with game show elements because there was definitely prizes given away and stuff like that. But that was crazy. That was literally wrangling cats. I mean, I guess if anyone's wondering if there's something I won't work on, the answer is no. I'll basically work on anything.
Well, another show that you worked on was the 2019 NBC Summertime Comedy Competition series, Bring the Funny. Now, years ago, NBC aired the very successful Last Comic Standing, but Bring the Funny only lasted one season. So do you think Bring the Funny had the potential to become more successful, but just wasn't given the chance?
I thought it would have been more successful just based on that it was NBC, it was prime time. And if I recall, they advertised it pretty well. And we took over 4 stages at Universal, and we had a huge set. I mean, it was a production. Not that big necessarily means good, but with Bring the Funny, what I thought was interesting and different was that we had 3 different categories. There was stand-up, there was skit, and then there was, I don't think we used the term novelty, but it was something like that.
It was variety.
Variety, thank you. So with Bring the Funny, as a TV fan, I suckled on the teat of television growing up. To see this kind of competition show where it was literally 3 completely different types of comedy. Any art form is subjective, but this was actually literally 3 different types of things. If you're doing a singing competition show, it might be a different genre, but it's still singing. And not to say that singing's easier than comedy, but to do a sketch comedy troupe versus a stand-up comic or a variety act versus a stand-up, any of those things I thought was really interesting. I was surprised that didn't do better. I'm never going to badmouth the show that I did, except I'll tell you right now, Voz Kids, that was a nightmare of a show. And I used that as the barometer of all bad shoots.
Well, now I'm curious, why was Voz Kids such a bad shoot?
It was horribly produced. It was horribly run. There was a lot of crew people who had never done that kind of show, which is fine, but it was too ambitious. It was trying to be The Voice, but The Voice had already been up and running. You got to work yourself into that. The stage that we shot at would flood when it rained. And this was, I think we shot it in the summer. Yeah, it was definitely July because the production company made me work on July 4th and didn't pay me holiday because that's not their policy. It was just a nightmare up and down. We were having to beg people to stay in the audience because people would come, they'd hang out, things would be going slowly, they'd leave. Usually you'll have a certain amount of paid audience. This production wouldn't pay audience. They didn't have the money for it. So it was just a nightmare up and down. Hated it. Anyway, Bring the Funny, it was just such different types of comedy acts. If I recall, it was Kenan Thompson, Jeff Foxworthy, and I want to say Chrissy Teigen were the judges, and they were wonderful.
Before we get to the game, I'm curious if there's any specific game show or reality competition show, past or present, that you've ever dreamed of stage managing.
No, because growing up, I would just watch game shows. I never thought about working on a game show. And I grew up in the business. I think I've worked on them, or I'm currently working on them, because to work on the Bachelor franchise is fantastic. If anybody asks me, what do I do? And I say television, and they'll go, oh, what do you work on? That's all I need to say, because everybody's heard of that. You'll get 2 reactions. You'll get, oh my God, or oh my God. And Millionaire, even though it's not on, who hadn't heard of Millionaire? My dream would be to work more of the variety show thing. TBS is showing a show I did this summer called Go Big Show, which is a competition show.
It's time to go big. The Go Big Show is a competition series like no other. There's no singing, no dancing, just action-packed, death-defying feats of strength and talent. And I've got an insane crowd of tailgaters in a parking lot behind me, ready to see it all go down. Every week, real Americans will compete to blow your minds with their over-the-top acts. Big risks pay off with even bigger rewards, because the winner will walk home with a $100,000 grand prize. Judging America will be the beautiful and talented Rosario Dawson, the man, the nightmare, Cody, the gorgeously gifted songstress, Jennifer Nettles. And the man that needs no introduction, Snoop Dogg.
Welcome to the Go Big Show.
We basically looked at it as America's Got Talent meets county fair. So you have these types of acts that you've seen before, but we do it with more of this down and dirty vibe to it. I would literally be on stage going, what am I doing? How am I doing this? There's guys who have 50 rattlesnakes in a container with himself. There's a guy who did crocodiles. There's a guy who pulled a car with his face. Just incredible stuff. I had a blast on that show. It was hard as hell, but I had a blast on that show. I would do little videos for my 4-year-old, and then there'd be somebody spinning a 300-pound log that was on fire in the air behind me. So that was essentially a variety show as far as the different types of acts we would do every day. There were days I just couldn't believe what I was doing within the body of the day. But as far as like a dream game show, for me, I'm actually living the dream.
Well, working on Go Big Show means you got to do something I'm sure many people have dreamed about, and that is working with Snoop Dogg.
That was great, working with Snoop Dogg and Jennifer Nettles, Cody Rhodes, and Rosario Dawson. They were all fantastic. And the host was Bert Kreischer, who's a very popular stand-up and podcaster. That was very challenging also because of COVID and because of where we were. There was a lot of stuff on that show. That was a great competition show. Most challenging of my life.
Speaking of COVID precautions and the pandemic affecting the television industry, my last question is, you've stage managed so many shows involving studio audiences, as well as worked on a number of red carpet shows over your career. But now that red carpet ceremonies have gone virtual and studio audiences are limited to a select number of people or no studio audiences are used at all, how has your job changed because of the new protocols?
As far as audiences and stuff goes, it's one less thing to think about. Because when you're dealing with a studio audience, or even if it's live or not live, that is a whole other factor that puts additional pressure on you to get stuff done. But the biggest difference as far as for me and COVID is stage managers are one of the people in charge of safety. It hasn't broken down to the sense that we're in charge of making sure that people aren't spreading the virus, because they have COVID teams for that on all shows. However, you do take stuff into consideration, like if there's a host or a contestant on the floor, depending on the show and its protocol, but I'm used to calling on the loudspeaker face shields, because everyone wears masks, but when there's people on the floor who don't have a mask, you put on the extra layer of protection with a face shield on top of a mask. You're always doing your best to socially distance. For me, I'm always talking to a host or judges. The lead position, you're usually that close to them. I had to keep remembering to wear a face shield on top of my mask. Communication is a bit more challenging through the mask. But other than the studio audience and the social distancing thing, it's all pretty much the same. It's also very interesting if you're doing a show like The Bachelor or Bachelorette, where the contestants, they're not wearing masks when they're in that on-camera environment. So you almost forget that you're wearing a mask because they're not wearing a mask. And then you're like, oh, wait, I have to wear 2 masks and this and that, because you really want to be safe. Nobody wants to be the show that gets shut down. You know, you don't want to be known as the show. And thankfully, the Bachelor and Bachelorette that I have done in a bubble, we've had no problems. We get tested at least 3 times a week, and we've been treated really great. There are general guidelines for the industry, but depending on the show, for example, the Go Big show, the venue itself was connected to the hotel. So you literally never had to go outside, but you'd get a list every day of who was coming into the stage. Everyone had been tested, but there's different levels, meaning the crew was in quarantine. We were just in the hotel and we were only exposed to each other. But then if you were a certain act, like I believe we had some acts with animals, like steers. So we had to bring in some specialty guys to do that. They were tested. They were in the hotel for a couple of days, but they were also at a different level. So it's harder, but it's not hard enough that you're like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to deal with it. No, you deal with it and it's fine. And nobody has tested positive on a show that I've worked on. And I've worked on 7 shows since July. And let's be honest, television studio audience is so far down the list of things that matter during a pandemic. But when we do come back, I'm very much looking forward to that first Bachelor or Bachelorette studio audience because they're going to go nuts. Bachelor Nation, they are great. Bachelor Nation was going to Las Vegas to get into the Millionaire audience to see if there was any way they can get into a Bachelor show. That's how crazy Bachelor Nation is.
Well, I hope Bachelor Nation is going to enjoy what is about to happen because, Raf, we have reached my favorite portion of the game show. It is time for the game of the day.
Game of the day.
Woo!
And as I said at the beginning of the show, you're going to play a version of a game show that you stage managed for, and that game show is the one in which we know each other from, the Misery Index. This game is called Now That's Miserable. Now that's miserable.
Woo!
Now, a little backstory about this specific playing of Now That's Miserable. So I recently had the creators and co-executive producers of the Misery Index on the game show as my special guests, Andy Breckman and the Newmark brothers, Ben and Dan, and they played Now That's Miserable as a head-to-head-to-head competition. But there were a few leftover scenarios not chosen during their playing, and I'm someone who does not like to waste any game material. So we are going to play the remaining 7 scenarios for your game today.
All right, let's do it.
So here's how we play your version of Now That's Miserable. In front of me are 14 Misery Index inspired scenarios that I created, and they have been divided into 7 scenario duos. Before the show, I asked a number of our Misery Index coworkers to rank these events from 1 to 100 on the Misery Index based on the 3 pillars of misery. Those are physical pain, emotional trauma, and long-term psychological impact. Now, the average of the participants' rankings, that's what determined its final number on the Misery Index. So you'll pick one of the pairings, and after hearing the 2 miserable events, you must figure out which event ranks higher on the Misery Index. So if you can successfully guess the higher Misery Index ranking of 4 out of the 7 pairs of scenarios, you will be deemed a winner.
All right.
And those are all the rules. So, Raf, are you ready to get miserable and play this game?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Then let's play Now That's Miserable.
I would cue applause right there. So the audience would be applauding, they'd bring it down, and then the host takes off.
Even on a radio show, you know how to properly stage manage.
What I do.
Before you pick your first number, I'm curious to know, when you're on set stage managing the Misery Index and watching the episode play out, how well do you do? Do you pick a lot of the correct answers?
I would put myself at average. I'm not very good at that game, but I would put myself just average.
Well, hopefully this game will increase your statistics to above average. Again, the 3 pillars of misery to always keep in mind are physical pain, emotional trauma, and long-term psychological impact. So I have numbers 1 through 7 available. Which number would you like first, Raf?
Let's go number 1.
Number 1 it is, and here are your 2 scenarios. Remember, you're choosing the one you think ranks higher on the Misery Index. You get run over by a golf cart while walking on a golf course, and you get struck by lightning while on a riding lawnmower.
Struck by lightning.
Are you locking that in?
Locked in.
Well, let's see. You got struck by lightning while on a riding lawnmower. That got a 76 on the Misery Index. You get run over by a golf cart when walking on a golf course. That actually got a 60, so you're correct.
There we go.
All right, so you have 1 down, and you have 3 more to go for a win, and you have 6 more pairs of scenarios. Which one would you like?
Let's go in order. Let's go number 2.
Number 2. Okay, here comes your 2 scenarios. We have, you match with your brother or sister on Tinder, or you walk in to find your wife making love to your brother in your bed.
Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to go with you walk in on your sibling with your spouse as more miserable.
All right, you're going to lock that in?
Locked in.
You walk in to find your wife making love to your brother in your bed. Got a 72, but you match with your brother or sister on Tinder. Got a 33, so you're right again.
There you go.
So you have 2 right, 2 to go. Are we going to go in order with number 3?
Let's go in order, number 3.
All right, here comes your 3rd scenario duo. And Raf, this time you have to choose between, coincidentally, you answer the first question incorrectly on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Or you get 4 X's and get booed off the stage while auditioning for America's Got Talent.
I need clarification. Millionaire doesn't air if you miss the first question. Are we saying both of these scenarios are aired on national television?
Yes, both of these scenarios have aired on TV. And now you actually brought up something that I didn't know. Are not all the $0 winners aired? Because there have been a few contestants who walked away with nothing during the Chris Harrison run that have aired.
I was always under the impression that we don't air that. I didn't realize that they do air people who miss the first question. I assume they did at the beginning of the run, but I got to tell you, when you're on the floor and someone misses the first question, wow, it is so awkward. In Austin, it'll just be people just didn't take their time and they didn't listen. They didn't see one word in the question. But when that happens, I get them off the floor as fast as possible. So I'm going miss the first question on Millionaire.
And you're going to lock that in?
Locked in.
You answer the first question incorrectly on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Got a 41.
Oh, I think I'm doing bad on this one.
You get 4 X's and get booed off the stage while auditioning for America's Got Talent. Received a 43. So I'm sorry, Raf, you're incorrect.
Oh, no. I'm still sticking with my answer. I don't care. Because one is subjective talent. The other is you got the easiest question wrong. Anyway, all right. I disagree. But go ahead.
You still have 2 correct answers, though, and you need 2 more correct answers to win. And you have numbers 4 through 7 remaining.
Okay, let's go to number 4, please.
All right, here we go. Here are your choices. We have your seatbelt comes undone while at the top of a roller coaster. Or you ride your bike off the side of a mountain and tumble down to the bottom.
I'm going to go with you ride your bike off the side of a mountain, locked in.
All right. You ride your bike off the side of a mountain and tumble down to the bottom. Got a 77. Your seatbelt comes undone while at the top of a roller coaster. Got a 71. So you're right.
Yes. There we go.
You are 3 for 4. Only 1 more correct answer you need to win, and you have 3 tries at it. So are we going to do number 5?
Yes, sir, we are. Number 5.
Okay, here are your choices. We have a crystal chandelier falls on you and breaks your neck. Or you puncture your throat while sword swallowing.
Jesus Christ. I'm going to say a crystal chandelier falls on you and breaks your neck is worse. Locked in.
All right, this is potentially for the win. A crystal chandelier falls on you and breaks your neck. Got an 83. You puncture your throat while sword swallowing. That got an 81, so you won!
Yes!
Would you like to play numbers 6 and 7?
Sure, why not? Throw them at me.
Number 6 is a firecracker explodes in your face while lighting it, or a crowd of shoppers trample you while rushing through the door.
I'm going to go crowd of shoppers because I think that's going to stick with you longer. Lock that in.
All right, let's see where they land on the misery index. A crowd of shoppers trample you while rushing through the door. Got a 57. And a firecracker explodes in your face while lighting it. Got a 68. So unfortunately, you're incorrect. So this was the last one. Try to make it 5 for 7. The choices are: you throw away a multi-million-dollar winning lottery ticket, or your wedding ring falls off your finger and rolls into a sewer.
Oh, you throw away $1 million lottery ticket. That's more miserable. Locked in.
You throw away a multi-million-dollar winning lottery ticket, got a 68, but your wedding ring falls off your finger and rolls into a sewer, actually got a 45, so you're right.
There you go. I'm surprised it only got a 68. That actually surprises me.
Yeah, I thought that was going to get higher as well, but you got 5 out of 7, so congratulations. You have won this game of Now That's Miserable.
Yay, cue applause, 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 applause. All right, usually you would tag it out and you would end the show and you would thank everyone and say, I'm Bradley, but we will bring the applause down to hear what you got to say.
And what I have to say next is I hope you enjoyed playing this game, Raf, and it gave you great experience as to what it's like to be a contestant on a game show that you've stage managed.
I loved it, man. Thank you very much. I just love the game show. I love your idea. I love this idea for a podcast. It's great. Really enjoyed it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It truly means a lot. And that was the game of the day. Now that's miserable. Now that's miserable. Well, Raf, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the game show to talk about your game show stage managing career so far. And I'm really glad that you are the first stage manager to ever join me as my special guest.
Well, it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to work with you again. Can't wait to be your stage manager when you host. It'd be great. Love talking game shows and walking down memory lane.
And you always have an open invitation to join me again, whether it's to talk some more or if you just want to play another game.
I would love to. I would love to do it again, man.
Awesome. All right, Raf. Take care.
All right, my friend. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And before I sign off, it's time for another Bradley Parody. Bradley Parody. This is a brand new feature on the game show in which I create a parody song about an aspect of this episode. Now, I know for a fact that Raf is a huge fan of 80s music. And it just so happens that I am an 80s music aficionado. So for this parody, I was lucky enough to combine my love for 80s music with my love of reality competition programs because my latest song creation is about, you guessed it, The Bachelor. Without further ado, to the tune of one of my favorite songs of all time, Whitesnake's Is This Love, here is Bradley parody number 8, titled Bachelor Love. I should have known better when going on the show. I'd probably leave heartbroken and alone. So many days chasing after one man, and now I'll never see him again. I stepped out the limo, there's a twinkle in his eye. I was confident that he was the perfect guy. Tall, dark, and handsome, he looks like Mr. Right. Oh, I hope I survive the first night. Bachelor love is what I'm feeling. Bachelor love is what I'm searching for. Bachelor love, oh, he's so dreamy. Bachelor love, I hope he chooses to get engaged to me on ABC. I can't stop thinking he could be my groom, and we can get it on in the fantasy suite room. But for now, they are both ideas that are crazy. I first need to survive the rose ceremony so I can start the journey to Bachelor Love. That's what I'm feeling. Bachelor Love. That's what I'm searching for. Bachelor Love. Oh, he's so dreamy. Bachelor love. I hope he chooses to get engaged to me on ABC. Bachelor Love. That's what I'm feeling. Bachelor Love. Who is this next rose for? Bachelor Love. I hope it's for me. Bachelor Love. Guess it's not meant to be. Bachelor Love. I will be leaving. Bachelor Love. It's back home. I will go. Bachelor Love. You'll see me crying. Bachelor Love. For a man I barely know. Bachelor Love. This summer I'll be Bachelor Love. On a paradise beach. Bachelor Love. And I'll be praying Bachelor Love. ABC will choose me as the show's next lead. I hope you didn't just like that song parody. I hope you loved that song parody. And that was this episode's Bradley Parody. Bradley Parody. Well, we've managed to make it to the end of this episode of The Game Show. My thanks once again to game show and reality competition show stage manager Raf Orozco for being my special guest today. I also want to give a shout out and huge thank you to my Misery Index co-workers, Paul Steiner, Riley Skirty, Bruno Ferreira, Sarah Kelly, Nick Maritato, Rob Zappula, and Joe Lutner for taking the time to rate all of the miserable scenarios used during today's game of the day. I sincerely hope that the events you rated were truly only fictional and don't end up happening to you in real life. Now, over his career, Raf has worked with a number of my previous guests on the game show, including episode number 10 guest Chris Harrison, episode number 45 guest Ken Fuchs, episode number 53 guests Andy Breckman and the Newmark Brothers, and episode number 54 guest Jack Martin. If you haven't checked out those episodes, you definitely should by logging on to www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke. That's BRADLY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. That's www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke. That's BRADLY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. In addition, The Game Show is now on YouTube. That's right, you can listen to all episodes, game segments, Bradley parodies, and more by going on to The Game Show's YouTube channel. And if you're a loyal friend and true, please remember to like and subscribe. Plus, don't forget to like The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Facebook and follow The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Twitter using the handle @TheGameShowBC and #TheGameShow. And of course, be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode of The Talk Show, all about the world of television game and competition shows, The Game Show. I'm Bradley Clarke, the Bradster, and as the saying goes, all the world's a stage, but some stages have more buzzers and shag carpeting than others. Bye for now. All of the Bachelor franchise cuts and sounds used during this episode of The Game Show are courtesy of the ABC television network.
This edition of The Game Show was created and produced by Bradley Clarke. This is Austin Angelo speaking.
The Game Show is a Bradley Clarke production. Get your game on.